Hello again. This is Dr. Rand for the Human Freedom Project. We're so happy to be with you again. We're doing the Lord's work, and He wants us to do these videos, and we're more than happy to obey Him. And so we're with you again. This is number 54, I believe it is. But I am not hearing much from any of you, and as we look back, we have a website, which is the humanfreedomproject.com, and we're not hearing any responses from any of you, or very few of you, and we'd like to hear more of what you like, what you don't like. It doesn't matter to us because these are God's videos anyway. Do we want to be serving you and meeting your needs? Of course we do. So the chance to interact with you would be good. So if you want to get a hold of us, through the humanfreedomproject.com. We would love to hear from you. Also, we're talking about the two books that one is out and one will be out probably early summer. The first one is Rebuilding the Wounded Heart, God's Plan for the Restoration of Your Soul. That can be purchased also on the humanfreedomproject.com. Any monies that come from that are not going to me personally. Yes, I wrote the books, but these are God's books. And so the money is to further the Human Freedom Project and get the information from this systematic way of gaining freedom from the enemy. And it's all about getting the word out. The second book is not complete yet. I've written it. It's in the works, and we talked about that last time, so I won't go over that again. But that should be out probably sometime early summer. Probably sometime in June, I would say. And that's called Freedom from Spiritual Tyranny, God's Plan for Victory Over Satan's Power. And we're looking forward to the deeper meanings that God has given us and the deeper things that we've worked with through deprogramming, through everybody has some kind of programming on them. We're all being used by the enemy in some sort, but some people have been programmed quite seriously and has totally impacted their mind. So in that book, we talked about it last time, so you'll have to look at last time because I talked a little bit about it. But today what I'd like to get into is something that I look at the country and I look at how severe the country has been from its original founding. And one of the things that we really need badly is we need a revival. I want to talk about that a little bit, but before I get into the term revival and what it means, I want to talk about three things that I see mainly that have occurred in this country that really cause most of the issues. The first of them would be fear. The second one would be hopelessness. And the third one would be hatred. I think those three words right there have caused a great deal of pain and consternation among many people. All of us to some extent, but some people big time. With all the racism that they're talking about and all the everything in the between different men and women, and the abortions, the crime rates. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but we only have 20 minutes. But I think most of you are quite aware of what is going on around this country in terms of negativity, child trafficking, sex trade, drugs. I mean, on and on and on and on. And the morality of this country has fallen greatly. And I think a lot of it stems with each one of us that has fears. I'm going to talk about that first. So when we talk about fear, what are we talking about? There's just it's just being afraid of doing things, of being the person that God created you to be. Now, God didn't create you, He didn't give you a spirit of fear. He gave you a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And the power, the love, and the sound mind reacts to our soul. When it talks about the sound mind, we need to put on the mind of Christ as Christians. A majority of the country says they're Christians, but how many of them really act like it? And how many really go after God with all their heart and soul and mind? That I can't tell, but it doesn't appear that that's happening. I can make a judgment, but I will not judge this nation. That's God's business. My judgment says that the morality of this country and world has diminished greatly over the years since I was born in 1945. I was 1 month short of being a war baby, but I've lived through all the rest of the period since then, and I've seen a gradual disintegration and degeneration of the moral fiber of this country. We need a revival to bring back what God intended this country to be in the first place. And so it concerns me because I live in this country. I love this country, and I believe it's a country that God wanted to show the rest of the world what Christianity was like, and we have lost our favor and our flavor too. People look down on Christianity. The government says take God out of everything. That's not the way it was founded. It says on our money, it says in God we trust. Are we really trusting God now? No, and I think a lot of the reasons are that there's so much fear out there. And I'd like to talk about some of those fears that hold people back. They're afraid of the government, for one thing. They're afraid of what would happen if they went against it. And we have seen so many examples of what can happen. There are people that are killed for their beliefs in the higher levels. We're not going to go into who and why and where and what and how, but we know that that's true, and we've seen it in action. And so there's the fear of man. That's one of the biggest fears I run into on a daily basis. Is the fear of man is basically, I'm afraid of this person or that person. This person has more money, power. They're more sexual. They're more beautiful. They're more handsome. They're afraid of people because they have more power. In God's eyes, nobody has more power. He is no respecter of persons, and therefore we should respect each other. Is everybody as intelligent as the next person? No. But even though they're not as intelligent, we need to treat them as God's creatures because He created them and He loves them. And we need to treat them where they're at, which is what Christ did to us. He treats us where we're at. And some of us think that we are basically a Christ or a Lord or God ourselves with the narcissism that this country has developed over the years. There are so many people that are just so involved in themselves, and then they lord it over other people. Now, do I have money and power? Sure I do. But I choose to use it for Christ. I don't choose to use it to make people afraid of me and intimidate them. Do I intimidate them sometimes? I've been told I do. I don't think I'm an intimidating person, and I don't feel like I try to do it. But sometimes I can have a pretty stern look on my face, but inside I'm not trying to intimidate anybody because I am so thankful that the Lord has saved me. What do I have to be afraid of? He says that He's going to take me to heaven eventually. I believe that. I don't have to be afraid of death, but I definitely don't have to be afraid of life. There are so many people out there that are afraid of just living life. And a lot of that is because they don't know who they are. And I just keep hammering away at that. And it's what I find with just about everyone that walks through the doors of these offices. And it's upsetting to know what Satan has done in the area of fear, because God did not give us that spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. We know who the spirit of fear comes from. It comes from Satan, and that's why we do this work. We want people to have that fear removed from them and not have to be concerned about it anymore. When we go on, we talk about another thing that people talk about a lot in here is they're afraid of the future. What does God say? He says, don't worry about the future. It'll take care of itself. And it always does. The next day comes. Then the next day, then the next day. Something always works out because God's in charge. But if you're a Christian and you have a faith in God, why would you have a lot of fear? He said he's taken care of you. Either you believe him or you don't. And that's really up to you. And if you have fears, a lot of times it's circumstantial. It's from the way you were treated in your home. You were probably intimidated and forced to do things. And so you have that within you that you're just afraid to face life. You're also afraid of the unknown. There's so many people that have a fear of the unknown. Of course we should not know everything. But God knows everything, and if we trust in him, we don't have to be afraid of the unknown. We have to face it. We have to face it with God's courage and with his spirit and with his help. And so when it comes to fear of the unknown, we don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen. But probably 99% of those things that are the fear of the unknown never happen. I would like to deal with the 1% myself. Okay, there are some times where fear is legitimate and we need to be afraid. But most of the time, it's a hidden element in our life that causes us not to move forward. That's what fear does. Another one is the fear of not being good enough. So I'm not good enough because I don't feel like I'm good enough. I have low self-esteem. I have low self-worth. I don't believe that I'm as good as the next person. There's a lot of that not being good enough, that fear of not being good enough. Again, that just solidifies my job as a therapist. All these fears that come into this world and cause these people to hold back and not really reach their potential because they're afraid to move forward. So I get a little tired of that, but I also know who's behind it. It's behind Satan. Or Satan is behind it. Satan is behind our parents when they treat us improperly. He's behind other people that lord things over us and manipulate us. But still, the persons themselves, they can stop it. And that's one of the reasons, again, for these videos, is to show people how to get free from what Satan has done. Now, this is a serious issue because fear keeps us away from faith. So what does faith do? Faith gives us, in fact, I am going to talk about faith here for just a second because that's the antidote. I'm just going to read a couple of verses. Faith in Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Okay, so if you're fearful, you probably don't have a whole lot of hope. And because you don't have a whole lot of hope, then you get down on yourself. You are fearful. You don't move ahead. You don't try new things. For instance, I have the gift of apostleship, and I've started businesses and nonprofit organizations. I've written books and printed them and done videos like this. And I've done so many things in my life that says I'm a Christian entrepreneur, basically. To me, that's what an apostle is. You don't have to talk about it to other people. I am right now, but what you really need to do is just practice it. God gave you a gift, use it. You don't have to go spouting off about it and name yourself, I'm Apostle Dr. Rand Oman. No, I don't agree with that. I agree that in humility, God has given you what you need, and whatever you need, He gives you in terms of spiritual gifts and spiritual abilities. And if you use them, I find out that there's not a whole lot to be afraid of. But I also have the gift of prophecy, the gift of encouragement, the gift of teaching. I'm really a pastor to one person at a time. So I'm talking to you today as a pastor. Am I ordained? No, I'm not ordained. But I am blessed by God, and He's given me these things, and I need to use them, and that's why I'm talking to you right now. You don't have to believe a word I say, but I am obeying God, and that's the way it needs to be for each of us. He gives us gifts, He gives us talents, He gives us money, and some people don't have a whole lot of any of those. But whatever He gives you, you are responsible for. Too much is given, much is required. So I'm stepping out. If He tells me to do that, I don't care what people think about what I'm saying, but if He tells me to get out here and talk to you, I'm always going to do it. When I was younger, I was a lot more fearful. I was afraid of my own shadow. But as I lived life and see that everybody else has their issues also, I have learned to say that I'm just as good as the next person, and you're just as good as me, because that's the way God looks at both of us. He is no respecter of persons. So when it comes to fear, we talked about faith. Let me read another verse. It says, the righteous will live by faith. Another way of saying that is the just shall live by faith. What does it mean to be justified in God, in Christ? It means that God was looking on Christ, saw that He had all the sin of all of us for all time on Him, and God cannot look on anything that's imperfect. So He had to even turn His head when Christ was dying for us. And why did Christ die for us? To forgive us, so that we could have a path to heaven. But in the process, He justified us by saying, okay, God, I took their sins. Now when you look at them, you don't have to see their sin. So if I'm justified by faith, I don't need to be afraid of anything, because Christ is my strength. Christ is my witness. Christ is the one that gives me the power and the energy. That is so important to my living every day and helping people and being kind to other people and not being afraid to step out and do something. In another verse, it's 2 Corinthians 5:7. It says, we live by faith, not sight. We are sensual people because we are physical. We live on this earth, but we're also spiritual. We live in the kingdom of the world, but we don't have to be of it. We are citizens of heaven all at the same time. And because we're citizens of heaven, we can be free through our faith. God is going to bring us to heaven eventually. And so our faith is the substance of things not seen. And we live by faith and not sight. So we can't see it, but we know by changed lives in my clients, by my changed life, by changed lives in other instances, in many that I've read about or seen. There's nothing to be afraid of. If you're going to die, you're just going to heaven. Who wants to die a slow death? I would rather die in full vigor, as the Bible says. Now, Galatians 2:20 is one of my favorite verses. It says, "For we are crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, we live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life I now live in faith, I live by faith of Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ." And so, as we think about that, faith develops also in us perseverance. And perseverance helps us to fight through what the enemy is going to try to do. Now, this process has cleaned me up on the inside from all the strongholds and given me courage and strength to fight these battles. But on the outside, I keep being attacked consistently. Because of what I'm doing, Satan hates me. And I don't care. I'm not afraid of him because God is not afraid of him and God has defeated him. Therefore, why should I? If I have faith in God and I trust in God, why should I be concerned about the enemy? And he gets defeated all the time because I'm not afraid of him. And you don't need to be afraid of him either. So as we continue to move on, we're going to talk about hopelessness, and we're going to also talk about hatred. And those are two other elements that are holding us back from revival. So as we cut this session off, this video off today, I just want to say this as I always do. If the Son has freed you, you are free indeed. God bless and goodbye.